Good afternoon. I'm Ron Coley, Associate Vice Chancellor for Business and Administrative Services, and want to really welcome you here and thank you very, very much for coming to spend some time with us today for this orientation. I really emphasize that this is not training, it's simply orientation. There's no expectation when you leave here that you will know how to operate BearBuy. It's not the expectation, it's just your orientation. Before we get into our agenda today and our program, I want to first state the obvious. When you came in, you saw cameras in the back of the room. Translates that we are video taping this. So those of our peers throughout campus who are unable to be with us today, and this is the 6th such session that we have had. So I'm prepared to say that we probably had well over 500, 550 or so people who have joined us for this presentation here. We'll make this available online. And if there's a demand for us to have additional in-person sessions, we will do that as well. Now, as I mentioned, this is orientation, and it's about this system that we call BearBuy. BearBuy is just one, I really, really emphasize, is just one of the initiatives in our grand initiative on campus that we call operational excellence. Now everybody, I think, everybody's heard of operational excellence, and I would imagine by this point everybody has been touched by operational excellence in some way or another. I will just briefly give you a headline of what those 7 grand initiatives are all about. We're going to talk here about procurement. There's another initiative that has to do with organizational simplification. Now, that's where we all went through last year, and we looked at spans and layers, and we looked at restructuring our organizations, and that's what that was all about. We are going to look at energy. We are all about conservation, finding ways that we can save energy. We will look at IT. We know that there are better ways to be able to do IT on our campus. We know that we can do better in terms of providing services to our students. So we're looking at how we provide services to our students and changing our processes in the way in which we do that. The 2 remaining enabling initiatives, one has to do with finance. We all should be aware that we are a $2 billion operation. And if you're a $2 billion operation, there are certain ways that you ought to think in terms of managing your resources, particularly your money, for efficiency, economy. Well, we decided that we need to be able to have a series of initiatives that will help better inform us about how to manage those resources. And my favorite initiative, which I'm really hoping that we will all be able to embrace, is high performance culture. Now that is the initiative that challenges us to be at the highest level for everything we do in administration, which is the same place that our world-class university is with research, teaching, and public service. So that is the general outline of OE, and BearBuy is just one small piece of that. Now, with respect to BearBuy, it's not a very complicated concept nowadays because all of us do stuff online. We buy things online. That's simply all it is. So we're having the responsibility of building a system that will allow us to identify vendors who are our preferred vendors, who have already given us sweetheart deals, contracts that we love, put them inside of a shopping mall, which we get to shop at, so we don't have to do all the research that we've had to do in the past, and it cuts down our time. And on the back end, it takes care of all of the accounts payable and the receivable, all those kinds of things. Now, you're going to learn about all of that with other parts of the presentation. What I'm going to do now is just give you a little bit more of an outline of what you're going to be talking about today. First, we're going to talk about why BearBuy, why we want to do that. I've already given you a little bit of introduction to that. The approach that we're taking, someone will talk to you about that, and what's coming with BearBuy, how we're going to go about implementing this BearBuy system, and there'll be a real demonstration of how BearBuy works. I think that will be very helpful. And something that you no doubt are very, very interested in is how you're going to deploy it. How am I going to be involved? When is my unit? How is my unit going to be integrated into this BearBuy world? Well, that's we'll talk about that, and then how we're going to report from it. Why BearBuy? Well, as I mentioned before, it is simply a tool by which we can purchase smarter. We can shop smarter. We can do things in a way in which we are focused on simply buying that we need to buy, when we need to buy it, at the most economical price available to us. If we're able to do that, then that means that we don't need to waste that time that we otherwise would be spending on purchasing related activities. We can now spend that time on much more productive activities, which are the primary businesses of the university, which is teaching, research, public service. Now, I mentioned before about Berkeley being a $2 billion operation. Now, 25% of that $2 billion operation we spend on stuff, goods and supplies and services, etc. Now, we're very, very fortunate in that we have a sister campus who is just 10 miles away, just across the bay, who has a profile that, with respect to spend, in terms of amount, very similar to ours. So, what does that translate to? We can spend $500 million here, and so when I bring the vendors to the table to talk about the $500 million that we have to spend, they have one attitude. But what would happen if we were to integrate UCSF and Berkeley? That translates to $1 billion spent. Now these vendors have a slightly different attitude when they come to the table, because this becomes a very, very rich target for them, which means that they're willing to ratchet their prices down just a little bit. And if you only save 1%, 2%, 3% on $1 billion, well, that's some pretty serious money. But we're going to, I suspect, do considerably better than that. So that is where we are. That is what we're looking to do. I really want to emphasize again, before I hand over the mic, that this is an orientation. There will be lots of training, lots of opportunities to ask questions throughout this entire process of months. And the final comment that I want to make is that with respect to this BearBuy initiative, if you have complaints or concerns or annoyed about anything related to this initiative, please tell us. Please tell us. Again, I am Ron Coley. If you can't get anybody else to listen to you, I'm interested. Give me an email, give me a call, and I will respond. But we have a great team, and everybody's on board. But the other thing that I would mention, if you have problems, tell us. If you're happy, and you think it works and you're excited, I need for you to tell your friends. Because that's very, very important. We've got to get the word out. If we have something that doesn't work, we need to know about it. If we have something that works, the campus needs to know about it so we can get to that better space. Thank you very much. I'm going to introduce Jim Hines. Now, Jim Hines is that person when I mentioned that we were a billion-dollar spend operation. Well, I didn't get to decide that we were going to do this alone. I had to find someone at UCSF who was willing to partner with me, and that is to go to the deep end of the pool. And I looked around, and Jim Hines was that guy. And our bosses have endorsed it, and so we're in a good place. Here's Jim Hines, our executive director for procurement for both Berkeley and UCSF. We call it the Bay Area.
And I know there's no turning back because I now have two-sided business cards. San Francisco on one side and Berkeley on the other. Just to echo Ron's statement of our mandate, it's really our mantra. It's pretty simple. What we're about on both campuses is saving you time and money on what you buy so you can spend that time and money on research, teaching, and serving the public. To make it even a little more blunt, in today's economic times, short of new revenue sources, the University of California only has a couple of things we can do. One is to raise tuition. And as a parent of a student at UC Santa Cruz, I don't much like that idea, as most of the students and their parents don't. The second, and more painful to everyone in this room and across the Bay, is to reduce headcount. And that's just not something we want to do. And the third is this. It turns out that, as Ron pointed out, 25% of our total budgets between our two campuses is spent on goods and services. So every dollar that we can save in the procurement arena is a dollar less that we have to get from increased tuition and headcount reductions. So the benefit streams we were talking about, saving you time by streamlining the processes in the departments, and saving you money by lowering the costs of the goods and services you buy. There's a third category, which is what we're trying to do to help ourselves centrally, which is also to streamline the processes so we can do more cost effectively and more efficiently the services necessary to support you in the departments. But really, the bottom line is saving you time and money. As Ron pointed out, by pulling two campuses together and pooling our spend, we get a heck of a lot of leverage right here by combining that spend. To drive it home real simply, AT&T is a supplier to both campuses, and we probably had 20 different contracts with them between our two campuses. Once we started thinking in this fashion and started adding it all up, what we realized was we weren't 20 different contracts, 20 different accounts. We were one combined entity that was spending nearly $20 million a year with AT&T. And that was a totally different conversation. When we pulled them into the room and said, 20 million bucks, we want to see you treating us like a $20 million client. So we get a lot of leverage out of combining that spend. What we also get leverage from is combining our resources. Because individually, we can both support a certain amount of specialists in certain commodity areas. When we combine Berkeley and San Francisco together, all of a sudden we've doubled our scale, and we can now afford to bring in resources that neither campus alone could do. So combining our spend and combining our operations helps us drive benefits for you in the departments as well as centrally. But what we're here to talk about today is that third column, and that's really enabling technologies. And BearBuy is but the first of several technologies you're going to see over the next few years targeted at this space. And to use a UCSF term, this technology becomes the synaptic fluid that pulls all this together for us. And one key point here is that although BearBuy is a technology and it's based on SideQuest, which is by far the industry leader in these kinds of solutions in higher education. In fact, they have close to 100 different campuses across the country. This is a technology solution, but we are taking this opportunity to also look at processes and policies. As it turns out, everybody here at Berkeley and at San Francisco, we're very clever in our departments, and we come up with unique ways to get our work done. And without a central state-of-the-art system to help us do that, we're very creative. We get it done, but through a whole bunch of different types of disparate processes. This BearBuy program is an opportunity for us to streamline those processes down to not one, but a smaller number of standardized processes that are going to be more efficient for you. So we're looking at technology, we're looking at processes, and the third piece of this is policy. Both campuses, as you really look at it, we designed ourselves for what was possible in the 80s. And we spend dollars chasing dimes. So we saw this as an opportunity for us to take on some of those challenges and look really hard at, do we really need all the controls that we have in place, especially when we've got some enabling technology that makes it a tighter controlled system. So the third piece of this is we are actively looking at relaxing some of the policies to make your jobs easier and to make checking the checkers less of what you have to do on a daily basis. Getting back to the specifics of BearBuy, and you're going to see this in the demo, and you're going to see it as we start to roll it out into your departments. There are a bunch of different areas of benefits that you're going to see from BearBuy. The first, and I think a lot of, let's do a poll first. How many in this room are actively involved in procuring goods and services on a daily basis? Okay. How many of you are involved as maybe an approver or a reviewer? How many are just interested in the topic or thought we had cookies? All right. They're not actually either or questions, but so most of you are familiar with how the procurement process works. The system is going to introduce a new role called the shopper role. I bet a lot of you get stickies, a little yellow sticky. Your PI comes up to you and says, go get me one of these. Or they send you an email, go get me one of these. Or they just tell you, go get me one of these. In this BearBuy system, the folks that are telling you to do that, or writing them on stickies, are going to be able to do that themselves. They're going to be able to go online into the catalogs and look for what they want to buy, put it in a shopping cart, and then we don't let them do any more damage. They give that shopping cart to you. So they don't enter funds, they don't enter any of the details, ship tos, or any of that kind of stuff. They give you the shopping cart that has what they want, and then you, as a requisitioner, finish it out. And in other campuses that have done this, this becomes extremely powerful role. And you'll see 2,000, 2,500 end users, graduate students doing this role. And we can feel safe letting them do that because there's downstream controls to prevent them from doing too much damage. So that's a cool role. Ease of use. One of the big complaints on both campuses has been that you had to go different places for different types of transactions. And that's really annoying. One, you have to learn how that works, and you have to know when to go to which system. So one of the primary strategies in going to this integrated BearBuy system is that we can go to one place to start our transactions, whether that's a catalog or a non-catalog order, a service, or goods. Or some such things as requesting payment on a utility invoice, and we'll see a demo of that. So one-stop shopping is what we're trying to get to. Visibility. Another challenge at both campuses is that you really had to be a Svengali a lot of times to figure out where do you go to get the information you're looking for. With this system, in combination with another called Cal Answers, which you'll hear some more about today, we'll have the capability to look at just about any transactional data you want to, as well as any trend and analytic data you want to as well. So a lot more visibility from end to end and for trends. The speed, obviously one of the key objectives of an automated system is to increase the speed of transactions. The other advantage of the automation is that it also reduces the amount of error probability that's in the system because you have electronic orders going back and forth rather than manual reentry of data. So from the very front end, from that first shopper role, all the way out to the supplier and back to us, and then back out to the supplier and payment, we are trying to automate as many of those linkages as possible. Cost savings, obviously that's one of our prime drivers here. This system becomes the enabler for those cost savings that are essential for us to get what we need out of the $1 billion that we spend each year. And finally, the workflows that's embedded within the BearBuy system allows for a lot more control around approval processes. So depending upon how tight you need to manage your business and your department, the system will allow you to put those controls in place through very simple configurations of the system. It was kind of eerie when we first started doing this. Both campuses had independently implemented a procurement system of sorts. On San Francisco, we called it P2P, and we spent 3 years and a lot of blood rolling that thing out. Over here, I think the pain was more abrupt in BFS, but the learnings were the same. And one of the primary learnings that we got on both campuses is that there's no such thing as involving the end users too much or too early. So when we first started this back last fall, we made the commitment that on both campuses we were going to take a different approach to how we implemented the system. We were going to pull in end users and departments from the very beginning to help us configure the system, to make sure that the way we're designing it and the way we're configuring it meets your needs. And that adds a lot of time and a lot of effort to the process, but we're realizing already that that is exactly the way things will work much better on both campuses, and we hope you'll agree. And this is part of that process. We started it last fall with some workshops here in October, so we're almost a year into this thing before we've even turned on anything. We've done a lot of outreach. We've set up a couple of very key groups, end user advisory groups, and the liaisons group. And coming from San Francisco, I think one of the most refreshing aspects of Berkeley is people are not afraid to tell you what they think over here. Several times if necessary. And we have a group called the liaison group, which is absolutely essential to our success. These are usually the CAOs in departments. We've got, I think, close to 8 or 10 of them now. And they are so critical to our success. We go to them with ideas, and we know very quickly whether those are good ideas or not. We go to them with some challenges, and then they help us think through how we address those. And they'll be instrumental in the rollout as well. And then we've set up ongoing feedback loops so that we're constantly improving the solution so it meets your needs. And this is a graphical way to look at it. Started back in October of last year with some workshops. We spent the first half of this year going through those iterations around what we call prototyping and focus groups, but it's really, here's what we got, what do you think? Change this, this, and this. Okay, we change it, come back, say, now we're getting closer. Yep, just change this. That whole process has been going on for the last 6 months. We're now to the point where we're about to go into testing. We're in the town halls. You're the number 6 of the town halls. I think we have several more scheduled. So we'll go into testing, and then we'll pull you back in for what's called user acceptance testing. And this is your chance to help break the system, to see if we've missed anything, either technically or functionally, or process or training-wise. So that's going to be very key. And even then, we're not ready to go live prime time. We're going to do what's called live order testing. In about half a dozen volunteer departments, we are going to launch orders and take them all the way through the cycle, from the beginning shopping all the way through to the receipt of the product and payment, to make sure that the system works as it's supposed to, that the training worked as it's supposed to, and the business process worked as it's supposed to. And we'll show you, and then and only then do we actually go live with a full department, and that'll be, the first one will be in January of 2012. And David will talk a bit more about how we're going to do that and what the rollout strategy looks like. So what's coming with BearBuy? And we'll get into the demo here in a second. BearBuy does not replace BFS. BFS, or our PeopleSoft ERP, is still our system of record, but BearBuy will sit on top of it. And for most of you in this room, we've taken the people out of PeopleSoft to a certain extent. PeopleSoft is a very strong ERP system. It's not always the most user-friendly. So the BearBuy level, the SideQuest functionality, is what most of you will be working in, all the way from the shopping, the requisitioning, the approval, the invoice approval, and the payment side. happens within BearBuy with multiple integration links to BFS, so we're always current, we're always validating against our core system. In the demos today, you're going to see Tyson logging in and out a bunch of different times. That's just because it's a demo environment, and he likes to do that sort of thing. In the future, you'll be able to sign in via the CalNet single sign-in through the blue portal. And once you're in and you're validated, we know what your roles are, we know what you can do and what you can't do. It's going to be very simple. Shopper role we already talked about. Consolidated ordering process. Single point of entry. Hosted and punch-out. In the handout, you have a terminology sheet. And it talks a little bit about the difference between hosted and punch-out catalog. It's not all that complicated. Hosted is the mall that Ron talked about. We have a bunch of our primary suppliers, and we have all of their product in catalogs loaded into a central mall. And so you can go in there and do comparison shopping. But for certain types of suppliers, like say a Dell or someone who's got a configurator, which means you go in and do something kind of cool on their system and maybe pick something from here and there and put together a configuration, it makes more sense to do that in their website and then pull that back into our shopping cart. And that's simply the difference between hosted and punch-out. The forms is something I think any of you that have had to place service orders or more complex things that you can't get from a catalog, you're going to love this functionality. We're going to start off with probably half a dozen different forms. Tyson will show you a couple today. And we'll add them as the needs arise. But I mean, it's going to be everything from reimbursements or payments for utility bills to reimbursements. There's a lot of different capabilities in forms. Workflow. This is an incredibly flexible tool. And one caution I'll give you is you can make this as complex as you want to. And I just suggest you think about how complex does it need to be. You can add approver after approver and make it do the hokey pokey, but the flexibility is there. Just make sure you only put in the controls you actually need. Another cool thing about this is because it's an online system, it's software as a solution, and there's almost endless storage capacity. This can be the system of record for supporting documents, like the receipts for goods, like requisition, the actual bid from a vendor. Virtually anything that you want to stay with that transaction can be stored and saved here. And so this should allow us to eliminate a lot of filing cabinet space and killing of trees. We talked about the electronic transactions. The back end piece of that is invoicing. And we were mentioning here that the high volume vendors, they all have the capability of sending us electronic invoices. We touch, I don't know if there's anybody from controller's office or disbursements, we touch 500,000 pieces of paper a year down there. So if you ever get angry at them, just think about the challenges they've got in touching all those pieces of paper. We do this, and a huge portion of that can go away. We get electronic invoices in. That means they don't have to be touching the pieces of paper. There's no room for operator error or transposition. On San Francisco, we did this we started this a couple of years ago. We had 500,000 pieces of paper. We're down to 200. So we've taken this down by almost 60% just with our first wave. So this is going to be a major tree saving and effort saving strategy. And the final piece is Cal Answers. You'll see a little bit about that. It's a real synergistic solution. It's another OE program that works extremely closely with BearBuy to give you pretty much whatever you want to know about your procurement. The Fisher-Price model of the Weebles wobble, but they don't fall down. We'll show you a more geeky swim lane version of this, and Tyson will show it to you live. But it's a simple process. You fill up your shopping cart. If you're a PI, you hand that off to the rec creator. Rec creator does what they need to do and puts in the chart fields. To the extent that authorization is needed, it goes on to the authorization. And if you want to add approvers or you need to add approvers, you can. And then it goes on to purchasing only if it meets certain criteria, like the dollars or a high enough level, or it's controlled substance. And then they get shipped electronically to the vendor. The vendor fulfills the order, whether it's a service or a product. You can in this system receive. The receiving can be used to confirm that the services or products were were actually delivered or received, and a lot of federal funding, that's absolutely essential. But it's important to point out that this receiving is not necessary for payment to happen. We're moving toward what's really industry standard, which is two-way match, which means that if the invoice and the PO match each other within tolerances, they get paid. Unless they're over a certain dollar threshold. And you want to be careful, because at certain levels, the risk is high enough that you want somebody to take a look at it before that payment gets made. But there will be a line at which below that, the two-way match, once that match is within tolerance, payment will be electronically triggered. The roles, there are a few new roles. We talked about the shopper role. The rec creator, that's not a new role. That exists already in BFS. There are different types of authorizations that can be put into the workflow. And as I stated before, these are options for you. Make sure that you're not over-engineering your solution. But you can even have the cart authorized. So if somebody is shopping, fills the cart, and you don't even want it to become a requisition until the PI sees what's in that cart, you can do that with this role. And then there's a variety of other authorizations that you can put into the process. The traditional purchasing approval is an existing role. Receiving is an existing role. Voucher approval is an existing role. PO change order processor is going to be enhanced in BearBuy. It's fairly powerful. This and these two roles are very powerful because they basically give that person that has those roles the authority to okay a payment when something's out of tolerance. So let's say you ordered 5 of widgets, but 6 came in, and rather than return that 6th, you know you're going to use it. These match exception approver can say, okay, I'm good with that. They push the button and it says that's acceptable, and we'll pay that and we'll keep it, and you don't need to do a change order. So one of our ulterior motives here is to reduce the number of change orders we do, because right now we're kind of off the charts versus our peers in higher education and how many change orders we do. So we know that's never going to go away completely, but we're taking some strategies to try to reduce that. Yeah.
Is the cart authorizer the one at a time with chart string?
No.
The cart? That'd be the requisition.
That's the requisitioner. The cart authorizer is even before it gets to the requisitioner. You would use that if you had a PI that had a graduate student that's filling the cart with whatever, and you just wanted to, at least for the first 2 weeks that graduate student is there, make sure he takes a look at what it is before we waste time with a requisitioner doing that. You can put that role in there. Yeah.
I also have a question. About it being a system of record for supporting docs and comments, is that tied to my identity because I'm logging into the system, or is that tied to my unit? Because like if I change jobs, I still want them to be able to have access.
It's probably tied to both.
Yeah, it's tied to you. You entered it, but everybody can basically see that. So it's pretty open that way, but they can't change it.
Thank you. Hi. So I'm Tyson Nogler. I'm sorry, I'm a little sick, so I sound a little bit like a frog today, but I will try not to do too much coughing. I'm the manager of operations and technology within procurement services, so we will be the systems administrators for BearBuy. I'm going to give two examples today, one using the search function within the catalogs and one using one of the forms. I'll show you both the forms. This here is a common workflow, and I know it's very hard to see in the back. We're not necessarily going to go through this, but it's a swim lane function here with the shopper and the rec creator. This is the org node approver and central departments there, and then going into the payment voucher. And the receiving, like Jim had said, is not required for payment, but the capability is within the system. Those are specific to the workflow. I'm going to go ahead. Okay, so as Jim had said, you will be logging on through the blue portal, so it'll be a single login. I'll have to come back to this page a couple of different times because I'm going to be going in and out of different people. So we've named our different people. We're going to start the first one as Larry Lab Manager. Now everybody has a shopping role, so regardless of the other roles you may be assigned in the system, you will still have a shopping role. You'll be able to be a shopper and go in and choose things. Let me just kind of give a little overview of the page here. So this is the search function. You'll notice it's very similar how you might go onto online right now and just purchase something for yourself. There's a search function, different ways to look at different areas, kind of to browse by suppliers or categories. You could also go look directly into individual hosted suppliers. That's our list of hosted suppliers that will be expanded. There's an announcement area for different things that may be going on with BearBuy, or if certain hosted suppliers may be having some sort of special arrangement, that can all be put in here. And then there's an action items, and kind of it's similar to what you can look at through up there, but that everything you're working on or everything that gets assigned to you at some point comes here through your action items. So you can just click into any one of these lines, and those will be the items that are waiting for your approval, or depending on what your role is. It has a little more. I'll go down a little farther. So then this is the frequently used forms. Right now there's only two on there. The non-catalog form, which is one that would be used for vendors who are basically not within the system. And then a payment request form, which used to be known as the check request form, out of disbursements, and that's for direct payment when the PO is not necessary. And down at the bottom, there's our punch out. Like Jim was talking about, we might go to a specific computer supply. It's punching out, going to their operation, going to their online store, putting together what computer you want to buy or what particular item you want to buy, and then pulling that back in as a cart and purchasing it through BearBuy. So this tells me who I'm logged in as. Is Larry Lab Manager right up here. This will be your name when you log in. Different tabs here across the top for the different. I'll go through them as we go through. So let's just go ahead and get started with the example. So I'm going to look for some laptop covers. My lab has some graduate students. So I got them laptops, and we're going to look for neoprene laptop covers for them. So I'm really impressed with this search function, actually, because we realized last time you don't even necessarily have to spell the words correctly, and it will bring up things that look like that word. So here we can see, so the item list is here, and it goes down. You can see there's 9 items, 9 results. And they're filtered, so automatically, and again, this is, I don't think this is anything new from a shopping perspective, but you could filter by different ways, whether, by different suppliers. There's only one supplier that has all these 9 here, but, or different manufacturers, so forth. It's very simple. I look here and say, okay, I'm going to have the blue bag here, 6 graduate students, and I add it to my cart. And it tells me immediately, 6 items added, and I can go right to my cart. So in this example, it's going to be the only item I want to purchase at this time. I take a look at my cart. Now, it allows me, there was an old, there. It allows me to change the name of this cart too. So it comes up with a standard name that for each cart, but then you can go in and change it to yourself. Let's say Town Hall 6. So now this cart has a personal name to it. So in a search, I could always go and be able to find this cart again by what I've given as a name, or I can go through the numbers, different ways to to get to the same place by the information you know. I'm going to look at this, view the cart details. So now you'll see here at the top, this is guided checkout. These check marks here across the top, and you'll notice they're all green check marks right now. there are, so for each person in the system, for each role, there's a definition of what has to be completed by that person in order for the requisition or the PO at that point to be passed along. And so as Larry, the lab manager, I know that all these items have been completed and it's ready for me to pass it along. I do, and I'll point out one more thing here too. So it also tells me that this says, in case you can't read it, you need to be aware of the following issues, but it will not prevent you from submitting your request. Meaning there's still something that needs to be put into that requisition. In this case, it's the chart string, but Larry doesn't have to do it. So he can go ahead and submit this now to the approver in his org node. And we'll go through that real quick. Oh, let me show you something else. So this tab, but just before I go on, this tab shows the process of who needs to approve this before it becomes a PO. So at any point in time, and this was what Jim was mentioning earlier in terms of having multiple approvers or requiring authorizers from different areas to take a look at a particular PO or requisition, they would all show up here. So you could theoretically have 10 boxes, and as you go along each step, and I'll show this later, this will say completed with a check mark, completed, completed, all the way through. So at any point in time, you can go into this item and view what the PR approvals are and see where it is in the process, which I think is something we all miss or we don't get from BFS, which I think is very helpful. So let me just go ahead. Okay. Sorry, I'm not used to the keyboard here. It's this chemistry. Go ahead and make this URSO just for the sake of our example here. So I just that was putting the org node in. That piece I hadn't shown before because it was already in his chemistry, but that's the only piece that Larry, the lab manager, needs to know is what org he submits his items to. And as it turns out, it's very easy once that's been decided, and you can add it to your profile. So at any point in time, all Larry needs to do is come to here. And this happens a lot throughout the system where you have these drop-down menus of basically favorites that you've given yourself or that have been given to you. And so you're only choosing from a list. You have the ability to search through the entire org node master tree for our campus if you want. But in terms of keeping your own processes running, choosing these favorites and using the drop-down menus, I think is really great. All right, I'm going to go ahead and approve this now. I'm sorry, I'm going to go ahead and sorry.
It's chopping up the screen on the right.
Oh, I see. There we go. Sorry. Okay.
Is there a difference between submit or assign card?
Yes. So submit is going to submit it to the shared folder for that org node. So some of the bigger departments, they have 3, 4, 5 rec creators. All those rec creators will be able to see that shared folder and pull them into their own folder to work on. Whereas in assigning it is you choose that person that you want to send it to as a rec creator. So here it tells me that I've gone ahead and I've submitted my requisition. It gives me the requisition number. It tells me the status of it. I'm going to go ahead now and log out of Larry Lab Manager. So this has been now, Larry submitted it to the shared folder of the rec creators for URSO. Did everybody get that? Again, there's no quiz on this or anything. I'm just trying to give you a flavor of how it looks and feels. So I'm going to log in now as Chris Creator. So So Chris is our requisitions creator. The same thing. He has the same sort of home page. And he's got one requisition here sitting in his my assigned approval, so he needs to that's what he's taking a look at this time. It brings up the shared folders. So here's the item, my 6, and you see other things in here. This is our system of testing, and we only have one instance, so there's a lot of things that just get kept by the system. But in terms of what we're showing here today, my one item, so I want to assign this to myself so I can work on it. And as I assign it to myself, it brings it up into my PR approval. So as opposed to any particular, the department shared folders, right? Chemistry. I'm going to go ahead and work on that one item. So now it tells me, as soon as I log on as Chris Creator, that there's still that error there that nobody has put in the chart string yet. So that's as Chris Creator, this can't go past me without a chart string. There's a number of different ways to looking it up besides just scrolling up and down. There's also these tabs across the top that are to each area. So if you just wanted to look at shipping information or billing information, you can go to just the tabs. And like this, it'll bring it up to the top. So you're just looking at the accounting code area, what you need. I could also have just clicked on whatever the error is. So this is pretty simple. It's a chart string error. But if there was a different error through here, you could just click it. It comes up as a link. You may not see this, but you can click that, and it'll bring you right to where the error is in the requisition. So I'm going to go ahead and edit this. You can again select, build favorites and things like that. It's very flexible that way. I'm going to go ahead and. So now that the chart string has been added in there, you see if we go back here to the summary page, now there's no more, right? That's been removed. So there's no more errors to this requisition. Remember I was talking before about the approval process. So right now it's been submitted by Larry Lab Manager as the original. This is the person who originated the request. It's at Chris Creator right now, the current step. So if I approve this requisition, now you can see it's moved out of my shared folders, and now it's gone, sorry. Now it's gone through the process, and it'll be with the approver. Yes?
Where on the form is there a place for reason for purchase or benefit to grant?
So I've already proved that one, but let me just show you kind of as in any given one, the comments areas and the way you can attach internal attachments, external attachments. There's also comments from internal, comments that should go to the supplier. So it's very flexible in that way. If you had particular comments that you wanted about this item, not necessarily the business purpose to it, but if there were comments that you wanted to go along, at any point in time, we could add comments to this that everybody in the process that has access to this item can see all those comments, and they can see all those attachments. So if we go back to our requisition, again, this is not the one we were working on, but down here you can see that there's, over here, there's the internal notes and the attachments, any kind of what you want to describe this item as. Right now, there's no notes in there. And also so there's several places, not necessarily to get through them all, but there are the business purpose places, and business purpose, excuse me. And within the forms as well, the information that when in the next scenario, we put information in the form, all the way through the process, that form comes along with the PO and it's all together. Generally speaking, yeah, we'll have a couple of forms for different reasons, but the non-catalog form, yes, is for.
How
Sure, I can stress that. I mean, it's definitely the capability is there in terms of pointing it out is what you're saying.
Right, so at the requisition header, you can have an internal comment that supports that. You can have an attachment that supports that. You can also do the comments that Tyson was showing. And for the forms, it's even a little bit more granular, saying, for this particular type of service that I'm requesting against this grant, there may be all sorts of supporting documentation I need to attach. So hopefully that kind of hits that a couple different ways.
Just wondered, if somebody, if a PI sends an email with all the pertinent information and a link to what they want to purchase, can that email be electronically uploaded into this platform, print and scan?
That's, yes.
But the hope is that you don't want that, right? You want
That's correct. You're both correct. You can, the PI can send an email, that can be attached, and the creator or someone else could be the one who starts out that item as opposed to the lab manager. But yes, as a matter of course, we would prefer that they pass it through the system. But yes, like Chris Creator doesn't need a buyer to send him or a shopper to send him something and say, this is what I should buy. He has that capability as well if he decides that he, as his role, needs to purchase something. So I'm going to log in here as
Hi, as when you're logging in as Chris Creator, it sounds like everything from that department goes into one pool and then you have to pull out.
Yes,
What-
you can filter it and sort it, so it's not that you would have to look at everything that comes through depending on your role.
assign the card, and then you can assign it.
Okay, to a person? Okay,
Right. So
good.
there's two ways. It's kind
Good,
of and
good. So if
I-
you, because I approve for like, 9 labs with a whole bunch of different chart strings, but it's also a small proportion of what's in the department. So an easy way to filter, yeah.
on every attribute of that chart string. So if you're just interested in a particular chart field 2, let's say, you could filter that and just show it that way. So maybe you are.
But I'd be the one putting in the chart strings, right?
Okay, so now I've logged in as Amy Approver. So again, I can see in my action items here, there's 2 requisitions awaiting my approval. And here's the 6. So I'm going to assign this to myself, and so it's just simply selecting the item and go. And now I've moved it up into my PR approvals to indicate that this is the one I'm working on currently. I can have more than one in my PR approvals. And as well, what you were talking about, just kind of with the number of people, the assign versus the submit is kind of, it's determined by your department. If you have a bunch of rec creators, then maybe it's the shared folder that works. If it's only 1 or 2 persons, then maybe it just works to assign them like that. So I'm going to select that approval to go in and look at the requisition. So I have access to all the information that's been provided so far. If this looks good to me, I can see here as well again. PR approvals, just in terms of following it along, it just tells me every time where I am in the step. So as you being in there, you can look at any of your items, bring it up, and anything that you've touched, you'd be able to look back and see where it is in the process all the way through. So this one is good to go, and I just approve it. And so now a purchase order has been produced. It gets electronically sent from that point. Within a few minutes, she clicks on OK, and that order gets sent to the supplier electronically. Here's that item in her requisition outbox. So you see here, just the number. Again, we've been using this particular instance of the system as we've gone through these town halls and other testing and everything. Amy Approver has basically access to go back to anything she's ever touched and look at, and it's the complete information. I can go click on this link and it gives me everything as it was, including all of the attachments, all of the notes. I like that. Because this also seemed like it was always hard for me in BFSs to try and figure out not only where something was, but going to look back at information about things that I had input. I think this makes it very simple, just kind of being able to use tabs on the same screen to see this information. So now, I'm just going to talk through the rest if you don't mind. This is a procure to pay process. We're mostly going over the pay today because that's the sexy part. But from here, when the PO gets to the vendor ships the item, and maybe we can even kind of go back. Right, so we've done this. We had a shopper go in. Chris, creator, created the requisition. This was Larry that did the shopping. It went in here. We had nobody authorizing it, but the org note approval was done by Amy Approver, and the PO has now been sent to the supplier. So once the supplier fulfills the order, sends us the items or the services, it goes to voucher. Electronically, those invoices will be received in disbursements, which will match up electronically. There's no more paper in that process as well. And they'll, sorry, and at a two-way match with the invoice matching what the PO was within a certain tolerance, it will pay. And the payment doesn't take into account any of the receiving. It's just a two-way match. And there'll be some, just in terms of the payment, like this process here, we are looking into some levels of amounts that may be automatically paid as well in terms of not having further approval. Let me show you a second. I want to keep moving. We got David, who's a good speaker. I want to get to him. Let me give you another example. I'll use the form. All right, I just go in as Chris Creator this time. Again, Chris also has the ability to be a shopper. So let's say in Chris's department now, excuse me, he has a PI who works off-site, has a lab off-site, and they got a utilities bill from PG&E. They don't need to submit a PO to PG&E. All they need to do is pay the bill that they received, right? So this is the payment request form. Our forms are very similar looking. It certainly asks for different information depending on what kind of form it is, but fairly self-explanatory. Plus, there's definitions within each forms, and there's help within each box on the form. So so I did just click on the question mark here, and it brings me down information about the individual items, line items in that box. So you have kind of all that information is at hand. For this one, and put the invoice number. Right, so it knows, I put in Pacific Gas and Electric, it knows where the fulfillment address is and where to send that comes from the vendor information contained in the system. If I had a specific on this form, if I had a special request for handling, there's choices over there on the outside. So this particular form, the payment request form, gives you a whole list of essentially what this form is to be used for. Again, it's a replacement of the check request form. Pay utility bill. Sorry. If there's a specific, so that's my internal note that I just put in. If there's a specific message that I wanted to put on the remittance advice, I could put that here as well. I can attach items to this form. So I have my invoice, the bill I received from PG&E. I can call it whatever I want. It's separate. It doesn't have to be called the file name. Just a little slow. So now I've attached the PG&E bill to this item. This will flow all the way through the payment request. I have one line item. Unit price, I think it's 43. And that's the end of that form. Right? That's the entire check request form to make a payment without a PO. I haven't clicked save yet, but I got a question back here.
So I just want to make sure I understand, is this the new way that we'll pay for things that services we've already received, like catering and hotel bills and things like that?
No. I'm not sure how you mean that you've already received.
Well, because you pay them after they actually provide the services. They deliver the catering, then you pay them.
Yes, but it was catering specific because it won't necessarily be in here.
Okay. That's what
right
I
now.
was, so there's still going to be some other system for that?
Yes.
Okay.
Right, so
Yes.
the activity types that are supported in this form are listed here. So there's, right now, the current direct voucher form has, I think, 19 or 20 different activity types, and those are very precise on what the backup documentation is to support that. So that policy has not changed whatsoever. So that carries forward to this. So think, if I'm using that direct voucher check request today, that's exactly the same as this. Anything that doesn't fall into that category literally is exactly what happens today. Whatever that current process today is, it's still in that model.
Is there an approval process that goes along with this?
Is there an approval process that goes along with the filling out the form? There is we will work the form basically into the approval process, yes. Let me show. So again, that's all the information I filled out on here. I'm going to add this to my cart, and I'm going to go take a look at my cart. So it has here, at any point in time, I can always just click and go back to the form, take a look at exactly what was entered, but it pulled that information here into the requisition. We'll go ahead and rename this. Just update it. And now take a look at my cart. So now as Chris Creator, the first person submitting this in terms of going past, I've already put in the accounting codes. What's missing is this org note. Again, it tells me exactly, and the final review has the triangle there too, meaning it can't be passed along until I take care of the error. And again, I can just click on whatever that item is, and it'll take me right to where the error is. And immediately it changes up to a green check mark. And he's told that he's completed all of the required information to this point. You see here's the original attachment that I attached to the form. It also got brought into the requisition here that I could go right back out to and look at the PG&E bill.
Can I ask a question? What would prevent me from putting my own PG&E bill in there?
Nothing, but if the approver approves it, then I think you would have the problem.
And so there's also another step. This is really just the front end of the request. Once it goes over to disbursements, there is a point where they do a direct voucher review, we're calling it, where they do spot check, then go, okay, we're paying PG&E, not you. What's the real supplier invoice number, invoice data? So this is very much the beginning half of it. And then once it kind of leaves the org node approval, then it goes over to disbursements. It creates a voucher. They look at it real quick. They confirm the supplier invoice number, and then they let it go through. And then there's one or two other pieces of approval after that. So it's not a blank check.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I work in labor relations, and I'm just looking at the fraud part. Like,
You guys like doing that over there?
so I'm looking at, okay, where's Big Brother in this?
Yeah, so the double checking that happens today in BFS, none of that goes away. It's just happening maybe in a different sequence than you used to today. So, yeah, so no free. You cannot. No, I'm sorry. You could ask for reimbursement for your home electricity. I'd have to see. One second right here.
Yeah, go ahead, and then over there.
Will anybody who currently has a CalNet ID be able to be a shopper automatically?
Yes.
Departments won't have to submit a list of their shoppers or anything like
That's
that?
correct. So all employees with a CalNet ID and graduate students
And affiliates.
and affiliates will automatically be given the shopper role, not undergrads.
So if you're doing a sign, like you have a work study, could you assign them as an
Yes.
Yes, it would be under their affiliate ID, right? It couldn't be as a student on there. Yeah, over there, I'm
So
sorry.
this is just more of a comment than a question, because we've sort of done some internal meeting about this, and what I always bring up with having in the past had a blue card is that you can pay your PG&E bill with your blue card. You know, someone will always come back and, someone's going to find it along the line. You just have to go along with, this is someone's job, and, they need to take courtesy of that,
Yes.
So
there is a little bit of trust involved in the whole thing.
In everything.
Yes.
So I think that, people are always like, oh, this automatic payment thing is so, oh my God, nobody's going to be watching people. But I mean, I can buy something
It's easier
for,
to watch people in this.
with
It's
this.
easier.
I think
with the
so
history
too,
and
because
the
there's
list
a
and being
workflow
able to
line. Like with me, I have, with the blue card, I have a $5,000 limit. I can pay for anything, and you're not going to catch it till after the fact. I could be gone, somewhere. So
right.
it's
That's a
almost
good
the
point.
same thing. So.
It's a good point. There's the feeling is like maybe this is more open, and so are more bad things going to happen. But in reality, I think and we'll see once we get into it. But the ability to look at things and to search for things and to examine the items that have been purchased is simpler with the system here, more direct. Yeah, go ahead. One more, and then I don't want to get along, but go ahead.
I'm a purchaser, and I use a blue card a lot. And so after the blue card, we have the IOC, and then we put it in the binder. And then there's someone else who goes through each of the IOCs and creates another kind of spreadsheet to kind of verify everything is, I guess, showed up on our books. And so we've been audited once or twice. How will this have the documentation so when audit committee does come up, we can pull this information to have it available so we can correct things or.
Right. So
Repeat the question.
sure. So and then I'll paraphrase. So in terms of being audited or using this information that's in here, they've been audited before, blue card items. What in here, how would you go about being able to pull that information for an audit or for review?
Yeah.
So there's a history tab up here, and it has a search functions associated with it here of how to filter out. So being able to pull out that information if it was a particular org node you were looking at or something, a particular department ID, you can pull that information straight from the system. This, we'll talk about Cal Answers in a little bit as well, and kind of the difference between Cal Answers and this. This system is very good for looking at individual transactions and seeing what happened. It's not so great for a summary view of something, where that's what the Cal Answers is really looking at, analysis of a group of items and what happened to them.
And one thing, if you were saying, if let's say a naval researcher comes and says, we want to know every single purchase for this project. So we're going to look at chart field 2. So you could say, I want to know I can search here and say, just for this chart field 2, I want to see everything in 2010. You could do that. You could dump it to Excel. Here's the rec number, here's the PO, here's the vendor, and kind of get in the neighborhood of what you want. And then you can kind of start, sifting through it at that point. So you have a little bit of that self-service as well.
And everything that was attached or commented on is still in there. So if you needed to actually see the attachment, whatever, it's all contained within the same file. All right, let me just wrap this up and let David have some time here. So
How long is the history retained in the system?
forever is what I understand. Yeah, they've been in business 14 years, I believe. I heard SciQuest has, and they've never deleted a transaction so far. So I have again, just to kind of get back to, I'm paying the PG&E bill. I get the green check marks all across the top, so I know that I can submit it as Chris Creator. I'm going to go ahead and submit it again. So now I've submitted this to Amy, the approver. Now Amy can go in. So I was telling you there's multiple ways to go in. Sometimes you can, if it makes sense, you go on the left side of the home page to get to the same place. But here's her work list. So she can see what's been submitted.
I think it might be under Paul.
Paul, PI. That's great. Okay, this is good actually. Okay, I want to point something out with this one here. I'm sorry. That's the one I chose, though. Sorry, this is me. It's not the system. Give me 1 second. Amy approvers in there. Jens, I don't see the chem. This is Amy. And she was listed as one of my approvers. Chris. That's the one, yes. Okay, thank you.
And then do that one for Paul.
Sorry. Okay, so I approved that item now. That was my mistake not having approved it.
So this will show us, as part of this is, again, the rec creator created the payment request, and some of the behind the scenes workflow says, based on this chart field too, it will also automatically add a particular individual. And one of the things we've modified in BFS is that certain chart field twos, a person, if they're owning that chart field two, let's say they want to see every single transaction just in case, right? The chart field 2 will automatically activate, and they are another person that they delegate to will be able to approve every single requisition that's hitting that chart field 2. So in very precise examples, a lot of scientists love to have that kind of control. So that's what this is going to see as we're now in as Paul, and Tyson will show us what happens there.
Okay, so Paul was the chart field 2, his identification. So this automatically brings in Paul into the requisition process. So this was what was submitted. And right now, so I changed the chart string to add Paul PI, to add a chart field too, so Paul PI would show up. But you can see he gets put in here before the org node approval. So you can put in multiple people here if you wanted the PI. Maybe there's another PI that also wants to look at the items before it goes to org node approval. And when Paul was happy with what it lists out for him as the purchaser, he can approve that request as well. So we can go into his requisition outbox, and here's that item. So this is the one that he approved. We can go back, just take a look at the approval process. So it shows us that Paul PI was the approver. It gives you that information. You know who the particular person in that was the approver. So now I'm going to go in as Amy again. And here's the item down here in the shared folder. I'm going to assign it to myself. So it comes up here into my PR approval, so I know what I'm working on. So now I go in. Now, first thing I notice is that there's no errors that it tells me about at the top. So if I like this, I have to do nothing to it except approve it as Amy approver. It's been complete. I could add an attachment if I wanted at this point. I could add comments into the item as well. It's all available here and all the way down the line. Again, I see right here is where I am. I think this is just the best to be able to know where the items are. Do it over. And Amy can just approve this step. So now Amy We filled out a form. We had the form created into a requisition. Amy just approved it to become a PO, and now that has been sent out. The forms are not necessarily, they're not necessarily electronic invoices as well, right? That's mostly with the hosted catalogs and the punch-out catalogs. But the vendor itself, so PG&E has a remittance that we know we fax them the information or send it by mail. So all that information is contained within the vendor profile. And it goes through the same process then in terms of workflow, receiving the items and going through disbursements for the payment. But it's a different way to approach the actual purchasing, using a form as opposed to just viewing what is provided in the catalogs. Any questions? Yes?
Do you get an electronic notification that you have like a new shopping cart waiting?
Yes, yes. And that's flexible too in terms of you can add people, you know, if you want others to get an email notification with that too, it can also happen. I'm going to let David go ahead. David Skrantz, give us a little more information about it. I appreciate your time here.
All right. So if this were a baseball game, you would now be in about the 7th inning, and if this were an opera, you'd be in the 3rd act. And if you're like me, you're getting a little squirmy now. You've been sitting a while and listening a while. I am your last speaker, and then we'll wrap up with some Q&A. And let me ask, how many of you got our most recent newsletter and read it? Okay, so you probably know that I'm just about the newest member of the BearBuy team. But if I look vaguely familiar to you, it's because I've been doing projects at Berkeley and across UC for a quarter of a century, actually, come to think of it. And so like Jim said, as we do different projects, we learn what does and doesn't work. And I hope that I've learned a few things about the projects that I have done here at Berkeley, and I know that my teammates have as well. And up till now, you've been hearing how we got to where we are today, and I'm going to be talking about where we're headed from here. And my role on the project is to help all of you use the system effectively, to make it work for you. Whether that means you're the MSO in your department, or you're the assistant dean, or you're the actual rec creator or an approver, helping you make the best choices about how to use the system well. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that, and then we're going to let you go. So there are a number of streams that get us ready to actually deploy a system on campus. First, we've got to get the technology working. And if you look at the timeline up there, and you remember what Jim said, we're about to go into testing. We're configuring the system based on all the information we've received since last fall, and we are about to test the system. We're conducting awareness activities like this very forum, and we will then, after the forums, we will begin what we call high-touch activities, which means we will come and visit you where you live, and we will come to your department meetings and talk about how it's going to be for your department, school, or college. This band, if you can't read it, back there says Cohort 1. A cohort is just a group of people that go through a similar experience at the same time. And rather than launching the entire campus on a given day, here at Berkeley, we're going to break the campus up into what we call cohorts. And so groups of schools, colleges, or departments will go together. We, as you'll see on my later slides, we hope to accomplish all of this by the end of June of next year, but we're going to pace it out between now and then. When we come out to a given group of departments or schools or colleges in a cohort, we will bring a toolkit of resources with us. And you will have a lot of information from us. You will have workshops that you go through to help you plan what is the business process going to be in your unit, what's the best business process for your organization using this tool, And then what are the appropriate roles and who should be in them? We'll do all of that working and planning out together well before you begin to use the system. And then while we're getting the departments ready, we'll also be working with the central organizations like procurement and disbursements to help them be as ready as they can be to serve you with BearBuy. Okay? And that work is already underway as well. So this approach of cohorts is really intended to help the people that are moving in the cohort together to learn from each other as well as from the team. I noticed even here today that some of you answered each other's questions. And that's exactly the kind of activity that we want to see happen in our cohort activities. We'll have ideas about how the system may work well, but you'll all know your own environments really well, and you can share with each other your thoughts about what will and won't work in your special part of the campus. We will be facilitating those discussions and bringing materials, as I said, to help with them. So the process involves assessing where you are, setting up the system with your users and their roles, training all of you, and I'll speak more about training in a moment, and then actually beginning to use the system. And after that, providing ongoing support through help desks and other means, and assessing how well it's working for you. So let me say a little bit about the different training opportunities that will be made available. There will be some online training tutorials. Sometimes these will be role-based and about very specific things. We don't expect every shopper to go through classroom training, so we want to give them some kind of briefing. They might well use the online training tutorials. We will, however, have a detailed step-by-step user guide for people who have more complicated roles in the system. We'll have instructor-led hands-on training. That will also be role-based. The training will be different for a rec creator than for an approver, for example. And then again, role-based webinars that are available on demand if you want to review the material that you might have learned from any other training experience. And then, of course, we'll have cheat sheets and quick tips on how to do the roles. A few key dates. We hope that to have the first cohort go live at the end of January of 2012, and the last cohort to finish, as I said, at the end of June of 2012. And for each department that we work with, we'll have about 3 months before you go live to get you ready, to talk about how's this going to work in your world. What is the business process? How different is it from the way you do things now? Are there special approvals that are required in your area or you particularly want to see? Are there, how widely do you want to distribute certain roles? How do you want to use your blue card now in the context of BearBuy? All of that will get thoroughly discussed and planned before you go live. Let me say just a little bit about reporting and about CalAnswers, although essentially I've been scooped already by Tyson about this. If you are looking for specific information about a given order, you're usually going to use BearBuy for that. If you're looking about a series of orders in a given org or department or a given period of time, you might still use BearBuy, as Jen said in answer to a question. If, however, you want to look at the total spend in your organization, what are you buying? Oh, and what are you spending your money on? Then you might use CalAnswers. So how many of you have a role that's more like a financial analyst in your organization. Okay, you are the people that will probably be using CalAnswers. And there'll be a suite of canned reports. There'll also be dashboards which use graphics to show you with pie charts and bar charts how things are going in your organization. And you'll also be able to create reports on your own. How many of you are on the BPOG mailing list? Just a few of you. I believe tomorrow afternoon, the CalAnswers team is going to have a presentation at the BPOG forum. The important thing to know is that these two OE teams, BearBuy and CalAnswers, are working together to help identify the procurement reports that are going to be most valuable to you. And there will be a suite of reports available in CalAnswers when we go live in January. And that suite of reports will get richer across the months after we go live. Nothing is going away in terms of reporting as far as I know. So if you have reports you love in Bears or particular information that you like to go directly to BFS to get, you can still do those things as well. But we hope to provide you most of your operational day-to-day reporting needs in BearBuy itself and your analytic needs in CalAnswers. Let me say a little bit about how to stay connected with us. We have our monthly newsletter that we just mentioned a moment ago. We have the BearBuy website, which we work very hard to keep current and fresh and relevant to you. We have town halls. We will probably have another series of these come October when we have a few more specific answers about thresholds and other kinds of things, and when we know a little bit more about best practices with the system. You can certainly talk to your colleagues, and some of you will be in earlier cohorts than others, and so you'll have much more detailed information once you're part of a cohort. And you can talk back to us by writing e-procurement at berkeley.edu. We've got a few other ways of contacting us. You've got Jim, who you heard speak earlier today. John Conheim, our local project manager, he's not with us today. He's taking a well-needed week off, but he's there. I will also write my name and contact information. I'm so new, I'm not even on the materials. But again, I'm David Scrontz. And you can reach me at dscrontz@berkeley.edu. Okay? And I'm happy to hear from you and figure out who on the BearBuy team has the best answer to your question. All right? I think that's BearBuy, and I'm going to give it back to Tyson for some further Q&A. So thank you.
So I'll take the first half of the room, and Rich Taylor will take the back half. So give us a chance to run over to you so everyone can hear your question, if that's possible.
Does anyone have any questions? Yes, right over here. Rich is going to beat you. Go ahead back there first, and then right.
Okay. I know we're trying to move away from blanket POs, but I'll be specific. I use them, they're service related, so the invoices vary from month to month. I work for the police department, for example, and we send evidence to different labs for testing. And these labs do not want a PO, they're not interested in a PO, and we don't know, how much we're going to have from month to month, how involved, what the costs are going to be. So what kind of solution might there be for expediting those invoices and not having to do a requisition every invoice?
So do you have blankets POs now for those?
I do.
Yeah. There will be specific, we are trying to get away from blanket POs in a general sense because they're used incorrectly in a lot of ways. What it sounds like you're describing, though, is not an incorrect way to use the blanket PO. So the capability, correct me if I'm wrong, please, the capability will still be within BearBuy to make the blankets, but will be we will try and be very specific about when they're supposed to be used as well.
Wonderful, because we also have some high value, like with background checks. And that's, the buyer doesn't need to deal with the invoice every single month.
Right.
That's a great point on the how do they know to use a blanket and what's the proper usage. It comes really back to what David was saying too, is there is some best practice conversation in each of those courts saying, hey, we're going to get to BAS, and BAS has all these trickle-down groups, transportation police, for example. Here's where release amount-based purchase orders, we're kind of changing our vocabulary a little bit, are applicable. Certainly services that are actual services are the right fit. There are other things today where they're frankly a little bit abused, if you will. Like I have my random VWR blanket, probably not the best pick. So there will be some very specific guidance on that as part of that cohort. It sounds like a punt. It's not. We have a lot of that documented. It's just we want to make that in the right context as well. Question right here.
So in the shopping cart, is there going to be like a copy feature? Like if you're ordering the same stuff again, can you just basically
Yes.
resubmit that?
You could save it to your favorites. You could copy that card again if it was exact. Yes, yes. In the back there? Hang on just one second.
Is there a feature in the shopping cart that will just compare all the vendors' prices, not just show you one vendor at a time? Or how does that come up?
Yeah, it depends if they have it. But in the example that I did show, it was only one vendor. But theoretically, yes, if there were more vendors providing those items, they would all be there in that list. Anything else? We're happy. Comments even? Yes, again.
Since everything can be scanned in and stored with each transaction, we no longer have to do the records retention?
That's correct.
Wonderful.
In hard copy. You have to do the records retention, but it's just an electronic copy.
It's there and it's
Yes.
centralized.
Yes. Anything else? Kate?
I'm passing along a question from a department business manager, so I hope I ask it correctly.
Okay.
But it's about the roles in BearBuy, and on page 4 in the handout, it lists various functions, and as I understand the question, I believe that a department can insert various extra authorizers
Yes.
at different points. And
Yes.
is it correct that you can insert an authorizer between the shopper and the requisition creator?
Yes.
And the question is, can that person be the same person who ultimately approves the requisition once the rec creator has created it?
Yes.
So in a small department, in other words, one person performing both roles.
Yeah, why they would necessarily need to authorize the cart if they're going to just approve it in the next step might be the question, but
As I understand the question that was given to me, because the shopper would be the PI,
okay.
and there's only 2 people in the central office. One is creating the rec, and before that person goes to the trouble to do it, they want to have it pass
Yes,
through somebody
it's quite possible. I
who
mean, it
has
is available there.
chart field approval.
And you could do more than one if you needed. And there's a difference between authorizer and maybe just to this point, authorizer and approver. You can have authorizers on the purchase rec or on the PO. It's not, the approver is the one who passes the PO along and makes it a PO. Passes the rec along and makes it a PO. The authorizers are just kind of agreeing that what is in that, essentially what is in that cart is what they wanted to be purchased.
So those 2 people have to touch it?
Yes, that's what so that's where I think they get into it. They have one person creating it and only one other person, then that person has to be the approver, but they also want to see it first. Thank you.
So assuming that everything that we want to purchase is not always going to be available in BearBuy, are you saying that blue cards will still exist?
That's a big assumption. I think everything will be a bit, no.
And
blue
then
cards will
if
be.
we do use blue cards, is that completely separate from the whole BearBuy system?
Yeah, so let me talk about that for a second. It's a good question. And I'm the blue card program manager, card program services manager here as well, so I'm pro cards. But they will be used, the expectation is that they'll be used less. A lot of these hosted vendors that we use now, people will just use, in current form they use their blue card for, they'll be able to go through the system. So I do expect it to go down quite a bit. But there are still reasons to use the blue card. One-time vendors, small vendors who, are otherwise outside this system. And we'll have more guidance along those lines too. The blue card program itself is separate from what's happening in BearBuy. The one kind of addendum to that that I'll add is what we're looking at in BearBuy is a possibility of being able to have your purchases approved, but then be made, the actual purchase be made by the blue card separately. So, but they would run through that approval process in terms of the automated workflow. Yeah.
Then you would call the vendor up and give them our blue card after certain approvals have been done in the system.
That's right.
And then we mention in there it was paid for by blue card.
That's right.
Sleepy if I didn't understand.
No, sure.
What I wanted to know was, since I do run a lot of reports and Cal Answers is about reports, how quickly or will the blue card purchases appear on those reports at all?
In Cal Answers, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, that the Cal Answers will have the same breadth of information in terms of all our transactions will be available to be viewed within Cal Answers as well.
Kind of like Bears?
Yes.
It does show up eventually?
Yes.
Yeah, just one thing on the Cal Answers and the blue card. We're looking at pulling a little more robust data from the bank to Cal Answers. And so that may not necessarily be available November, January timeframe. It may be a little later, maybe a month or two after, but we're actually trying to pull a lot more detail. So when you go to Cal Answers, you'll be able to see much more granularity of what that transaction really was compared to what you see currently in BFS. So it may take us an extra month or so to get that data inside Cal Answers. It's on the plan, and it will be very shortly after go live.
Sure.
In the receiving process, is there a way to upload a documentation such like an email?
Yes,
Like a
so in the
PI?
receiving process, exactly. Let me see if I can get back into it real quick.
Go to Home Shop and then go to My Orders. Let's go down. Yep, go down.
Oh, you're on here, yeah.
Won't have the split personality problem that Tyson has today. You know, if you have multiple roles, they'll all be attached to your one login, whereas he has to go in and out to be Chris Creator and Amy Approver and Larry Lab Manager and so forth.
Just go down. No.
I'm sorry.
Let me show you this real quick. We're going to show how to receive.
Yeah, I kept choosing my invoice. Okay, so there's no receipts for this PO right now. At any point in time, so it's because the receiving is separated from the payment at all, you can put in the receipt at any point in time and it stays there and it does not affect the payment. But all I do is basically come up into this available actions, which to me is kind of like the right click on your mouse, that brings up a list. And it's nice because it's specific to whatever you can do on that page. So it doesn't give you the whole list every time of things that can happen, but I'm going to create a quantity receipt for this item. I click go. So here's the receiving page. Enter a packing slip number. And we were talking about the attachments. Whatever documentation you had, you can just attach it here. And again, it stays with the larger transaction and for the life of the transaction. And anybody can go in and see that it's been received.
Could you just explain that a little bit? So this is when you receive a box.
So this is
you have a packing slip. You want to upload. You want to scan that and upload it into the system.
That's right. So I received the items. It came with the packing slip. I put in the packing slip number in here. I go ahead and I scan the packing slip and I attach it here. I can write whatever notes I want to about the receiving, damaged, whatever you might. And then down at the bottom is it starts out as a basic. These are the number of items that were ordered. So if everything showed up and it says line status is received, could just save my updates. So now I told it basically that we've received those items, a 3 and a 2.
And then so there's partial receiving.
There is also partial receiving. I could just do it a 1 and a 1 if that. And then this information in terms of receipt history and that it's able to be seen by anybody down the line again, and I won't search for one. But so it's fairly. Well, I don't want to say it's simple, but I like the simplicity of the information that you're seeing. The fact that it's tabs there, that all the information pulls through, so at any point along the line, you're able to see everything that everybody else comments and attachments and things like that. And also the separation between just internal comments that you want somebody else internal or external that could go to the vendor. Well, we really appreciate you guys coming here today. Thank you very much. We hope it was informative.